I met the old man haunting my local movie theater. For a bit of context, this happened years ago back when I worked at my local theater. Being locally owned, it wasn't and still isn't nearly as big as your big corporation theaters like AMC, but it still had 10 different screens, mostly with stadium-style seating, but some with recliners as well. It is pretty well maintained and updated, too. It's not old or dingy feeling at all. I have never been super gung-ho on believing the paranormal, but I've never straight up denied it either. Most of my family is the same way, but my mom is pretty into that kind of thing. Also noteworthy, my older sister had worked at the same theater a few years before me. At the point I encountered the ghost, I had only been working there a few months. I am not a night person, so up until this point, I had never worked a closing shift. I know, stereotypical spooky night shift kind of stuff, but it just so happened to work out like that. Either way, it was probably around 11:30 p.m., and Theater 6, being at the back of the main hallway, had just let out its final showing for the night. My manager asked if I could go clean it well, and take out the trash so it was good to go in the morning. Of course, that was my job, so I did. I walked into the theater with my broom and dustpan, and started sweeping up loose popcorn, straw papers, the usual. I work up the first few rows of seats, nothing unusual, but then as I hit the third or fourth row, I see a black figure of what looked like a man watching me from the top right section of the theater. At first, I thought maybe I was so absorbed staring under the seats for trash that I somehow didn't notice that someone hadn't left the theater yet, but as soon as I looked up there was nothing there but empty seats. I was a little weirded out, but chalked it up to me being a bit tired from working a bit later than I am used to, and kept going. Soon after, I reached the first of 2 rows of premium seats, being the recliners. We had to wash those off with a wet rag, so they are a bit more time consuming to clean. As I'm bent over one of these recliners scrubbing some gunk off of it, I once more see a black figure, but this time it is much closer, and walks directly behind me. Just then, I feel a tap on my shoulder like somebody is trying to get my attention. Once again, I reason that maybe my manager walked in and needs something, so I turn around and audibly ask if they need something, only to once again be met with an empty room behind me. Now I'm starting to think something weird is up, and I didn't like it. Now that fear is set in, I can't stop feeling chills go down my spine like crazy, and I'm always scanning the room for activity. I'm pretty much running down the rows of seats, and only stopping if I see a very obvious mess. I do the exact same thing with the second row of recliners at the top of the theater, almost entirely foregoing washing them down. As I finish cleaning in the top row, I once again see the figure behind me, since I am standing only about 2 rows directly above where I saw it the first time. It wasn't a particularly threatening figure in retrospect, the worst it ever did was tap on my shoulder, but it was late and I was tired, and I didn't have the time nor energy to deal with a needy ghost. As such, I book it down the left set of stairs, grabbed the trash can and ran out of the theater. I said nothing about this to any of my coworkers or managers, mostly because I didn't want to sound crazy. However, after going home I told my mom about the situation, and being paranormally intrigued, for a lack of a better term, she was quite into the story, and then told me, "I think your sister said that one of the theaters is haunted before, you'll have to tell her this." At this time, my sister was home from college, so I went and told her the story, at which point she looks at me with a clearly surprised expression and asks me, "You mean none of the managers ever told you the story of how Theater 6 is haunted?" At which point I told her obviously not, I nearly just shat myself cleaning that theater thinking I was losing my mind. So, to wrap up, after talking to the oldest of my managers, she informed me that an old man died of a heart attack in Theater 6 while watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre many moons before, and apparently his name was Tom. It just so happens that workers find that the trash can in that theater loves to fall over randomly, even while they are present in the theater, and it seems like I'm the lucky employee who had the pleasure of actually meeting Tom. It took some courage to go into that theater alone again after that incident, but I actually started to enjoy it after a while, and I would always try and ask Tom how his day was, if he liked seeing the same movie 30 times over, and that kind of thing in the hopes that maybe I would meet him again. Whether it be a good thing or not, I never did. Skeptic meets tall hologram-ish figure in broad daylight office. 100% science-based skeptic who experienced something I can't explain at my office in late May of this year. I need to know if there is anyone out there that has experienced an encounter like mine. Due to the pandemic, my office building that normally accommodates 1,000 plus employees have largely been empty save for reduced security teams, maintenance personnel, cleaning staff and a handful of mission-critical employees, of which I am one. On May 28 at 1:10 p.m. I was sitting at my desk, the lone employee at the far end of one of many large, empty cubicle city suites. Despite the emptiness, the fluorescent lighting and outer wall windows provide a comforting brightness. The creepiness factor is supplied by the multitude of small whiteboards hanging outside cubicle entrances, all marked with the same date, March 16, 2020, the day of evacuation. On this particular day I was reading emails when I heard very distinct heavy footsteps in an almost jogging gait approach my cubicle entrance and stopped abruptly. I looked up expecting to see a maintenance person. Instead, there was no one there. The sound I experienced did not match what I was not seeing. I jumped up to catch the person, thinking they turned quickly to exit the suite after not realizing I was sitting there. I looked down the aisle and saw no one, so I walked toward the exit. Suddenly there was noise coming from the print room a few feet ahead of me. It sounded as though someone carrying a heavy box was having trouble lifting it onto the counter and hit the massive network printer and overhead cupboards in their attempt. I approached the doorway to the print room ready to say hello and offer my assistance. When I got to the doorway with a smile on my face, yay other people, I very quickly realized the room was empty, and this was the second instance of sound not matching visuals in less than a minute. I was certain in that moment that I needed assistance from security, so I backed away from the printer room entrance and turned to leave. As I approached the cross-section of two aisles, I noticed something unusual. There was a post extending from the corner of the cubicle to the ceiling, an approximate height of 10 feet. This would not normally grab my attention, except that there are no posts in that configuration on any corner cubicles in the suite. The unusual post was not solid like the others and seemed to be composed of a density of moving holographic grayscale pixelated matter. I felt a little trepidation, but I also remember thinking, whatever this is, it's pretending to be a post, and was hoping I didn't notice. At that moment, and almost as if it acknowledged it had been discovered, the tall rectangular shape transformed in motion, or morphed, to what I can only describe as the side profile of a tall hooded figure whose frame commenced 6 inches from the ceiling and continued to the floor, again. Moving holographic pixelation of various degrees of grayscale, including a bent elbow and curvature of spine similar to human, except that at approximately thigh level the pixelation became sparse and much more translucent, to the point that I could see the pattern of the carpet through the lower body. The figure remained in a static position in profile. The pronounced curvature of the cut of the hood at the neck and the extension of it in such a perpendicular, gravity-defying nature, lack of drape, held my attention. I immediately thought it's projecting an image of something that would frighten humans. It's trying to look like the Grim Reaper, but they are probably not familiar with gravity, or their jawbone is very box-like. I know. I'm analytical that way. As soon as I processed the thought, the apparition glided forward into complete invisibility. I exited the suite and immediately reported it to security. I have since moved my equipment to a suite where 2 other employees work. There have been no other sightings since, although in recounting my experience, another on-site employee described having a similar sighting in the early days of the pandemic. They saw an extremely tall figure move quickly into invisibility as it came through a wall, crossed the hallway and glided into the opposite wall. I have googled similar extremely tall hooded figure experiences, and I did find some reference to a common theme of this type of apparition sighted in abandoned buildings, usually hospitals and other buildings used in health-related fields. This checks all my boxes. Subscribe to our channel, so you won't miss out any of our future videos. Thank you for your support. This is Reddit Joe Channel, your everyday Reddit.